if you're going to be in this business anytime at all, you're going to get schooled. And sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's worth it, but I'll tell you what, getting schooled, it's a thing. Out here looking at my frame, and I'm gonna have to clean it off before winter. This is what happens with salt. It's not as bad as it looks, but yeah, anyhow, I was looking at the sky over here, and you can see this haze. These are all from the wildfires in Canada, all coming down here. This is just all hazy as all get out everywhere. I don't know if you can really see it over the phone here, but everything on the horizon's just covered in a haze. Me and a buddy were talking today, and he's got about 5-6 years more on the road than I do, and we were talking about, you know, going from company drivers and all the places we'd work to becoming owner operators, and then how we got schooled. Because when you work for the wrong job, you don't know it's the wrong job. Not if it's your first owner-operator job. Not if it's your first trucking job. You don't know because you've got nothing to compare it to. And so that's what happened with us. You know, we had the knowledge, but we just didn't have the practical application. And we didn't have the mentorship that we needed. Now, I've talked a lot about mentorship out here. It's important, but you know, we started off as company drivers, and like everybody, especially years ago, you know, everybody drove like bull haulers. I mean, we just go, go, go. Didn't know any better. I mean, that's just what you thought we had to do. And, you know, and over the course of time, as we went from company to company, and not too many, him and I both really haven't worked for that many different people, honestly. You know, he's out here 28 years, I'm out here 23, and well, almost. And what ends up happening is you start building experience. Now, you talk to everybody, you do the math, you do this, and you have to take people's advice for things. Well, I'll start off with being company drivers and the progression that led up to this. So I started off years ago, so yeah, 22 years. It was the spring of 2001. I got my CDL, and I didn't know that many truck drivers, and what happened was I was dating this gal, and she liked truckers, and she drove, and you know, guys do dumb things for women. Well, I became a truck driver. I used to joke about it, and I was working odd jobs. I was working at Raytheon at the time, and I hated it. I hated assembly work. I hated line work. I hated, just hated every bit of factory work. And one day I joked, I said, maybe I ought to just go be a truck driver or something. And she said, you know, you said that before. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is and go do it? I was like, okay. So guess what? I went, signed up for truck driving school there at the Votech at the time. It was relatively cheap. It was $750 for a 6-week course. And not the $15,000 that these schools are charging now. So basically I had some money that I'd never spent from when I graduated high school that was sitting there. I had a bond that had been sitting there for years. It hadn't matured, unlike me. And so cashed it in and went to truck driving school. And listening to all these people and whatnot, I never really wanted to drive a van. I never wanted to drive a refrigerated, because I've always been a keep it simple kind of guy, you know. A refrigerated van is it's just one more thing, you know. That was then. So by a fluke, I end up, you know, hauling grain wagon. Well, as you know, as I've talked about it, that truck got repossessed because, well, that's what happens when your boss doesn't pay his bills. Then I became a car hauler for over the winter of 2001 into 2002. That was a disaster because my boss doesn't pay his bills. He also doesn't pay his taxes, apparently, and I had to straighten that out on my end because, well, I'm not gonna, yeah, that's another story. And so I go back to work for another grain hauling outfit, well, the one that it was leased onto, and that was good, but the pay wasn't there, and I had to make a decision. So as the old song goes, should I stay or should I go? You know, it was a great job, great people. But as I was soon to find out, the best jobs don't seem like they pay what you need them to. And after 3 or 4 months, I wasn't even making it at that point. And I just remember telling the guys, I was like, man, I just can't afford to do this anymore. I said, I hate to quit. I said, and I remember the dispatcher and the boss looked at me and they just chuckled and said, yeah, we were waiting. We, you know, we like having you here, but we get it. You know, they knew I was on my way up. I wasn't one of those guys like that were from the small towns out in the middle of nowhere, like where they lived, who were content on making $300 a week and just doing, you know, 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. You know, they knew I was young and ambitious, and I was gonna go on and do other things. So I quit that, got a local job doing hazmat and whatnot, and that was okay. But my boss was a drunk. I'd say he was an alcoholic, but he was just flat drunk. You had to get all your stuff done before 10:30, or there was no dealing with him. He was just plastered, and I don't understand why he was never canned, but he must have had something on the bosses of that place. But truthfully, I just don't think they cared. Work was getting done, and whatever. So that didn't last, and so I decided it's time to go on the road. One of the things I got schooled about when I decided to go on the road was that, especially at that time, everybody wanted experience. Everybody wanted you to have this, that, and the other thing. Nobody was hiring for flatbed without training you. You have to remember, in 2001, you know, of course, by that time, you know, the CSA hadn't started yet. The rules were the same. Deregulation was about 20 years old. But the mega companies had all popped, and they had gone back down, but they were on their way up again. So you kind of had to find a mega company or somebody to hire you, because everybody wanted 3 and 4 years, and everybody wanted a lot of things which somebody like me just didn't have. And I knew that the only way to do that was to go to a van company. I did enough flatbedding, hauling hazmat, to know that flatbedding was not my calling in life. And so I just decided, well, we're going to go look for a van company. Well, so I got on ClassADrivers.com. Well, yeah, that didn't live up to its name. So here's where I get schooled by the internet, because I'd never gotten a job on the internet before. You know, all of my jobs up to that point, I had gone down and filled out applications and talked to people and all that. This was my very first job, sight unseen. So what I ended up doing was filling out just the application, and I got 2 responses very quickly. Well, I got 3. Melton wanted to hire me out of Tulsa, but I was not going to do flatbed. And trust me, to this day, 22 and a half years later, I'm still getting spam emails from them, which I kind of find funny. But I get a job once through Cannon Express, which they were bought. I forgot who bought them out. And like Central bought them out, and then Central was bought out by somebody else, and they've gone through a couple of owners since then. And the other one was RBS Express out of Waterloo. And as you know, I went to RBS Express because they were a dry van company. Well, I believed everything they told me online. It was just very general. I didn't know enough to know I didn't know, but I was learning. And it all looked decent as things go. They promised me a lot of things that they quit delivering very quickly in short order. And next thing you know, I'm on a bus to Waterloo. So I'm not really going to rehash this job much. Made it to Waterloo, barely. And went to work for a company that was horrible. Just screwing you every time you turned around. I was driving roughly 20 hours a day on the average, getting paid 23 to 25 cents a mile. They were taking my per diem and my pro pay every time I turned around for something that wasn't my fault. They tried to charge us for tires. It was just an awful deal. So I learned what a job isn't supposed to be. And finally one day, and I've talked about this before, about the drug use got bad and all that, I just couldn't, and I realized we're done here. So I filled out, I had my experience in my year, and I got a job with Jim Palmer out of Missoula. And I got schooled as a company driver right then and there. Because sometimes the way to get schooled is to quit your job. So I quit my job and go to work for Jim Palmer. They had a terminal in Salina. It was about 100 or so miles from the house, so they had some pretty strict rules, but Jim was real old school. He knew what he wanted, he knew what he expected, he had expectations of his trucks and his drivers. Trucks were to be clean, his drivers were to be cleaner. Dress code, the whole ordeal. And that was where I first learned old school trucking, you know, from an old school owner. And that was a great job. So why did I quit? Well, I didn't quit out of anything bad. I quit because I just wanted to be home. You know, I was still young, wanted to date, I wanted to do all these things that young men do. So I decided to quit, got a local job, and hit the aircraft plant again. Well, no, that was just bad. It took about 14 minutes inside the aircraft plant to realize and remember why I quit it the first time. It was just awful. You know, it dominated your life. You didn't. So right then and there, I got schooled of what I didn't want to do in life. I was still young at the time, you know, and not quite 30 yet. So I got to thinking, you know, when you get your 5-year mark in trucking, you have to make a very real decision, especially in your mid-20s, because you are running out of time for employment. You need to start settling in. You need to start getting vested somewhere. You need to start living as an adult. And I knew that, so I got all the way out of it to realize I should have gotten all the way back into it. So I went back out on the road. Now I wanted to go back to Jim Palmer, but certain things happened, and something that I'm really not going to talk about. Something that I probably should have sued a previous employer for. I drove cement truck for just a few months, and somebody in that office gave out a bunch of personal information when I reapplied at Jim Palmer that they legally had no intention of giving out. And I was denied a job because of that, despite the fact that they claimed they didn't do anything, yet the employment agency or the people from DAC were telling me word for word what happened, and it wasn't on the form that they emailed off. So I was just really upset. Of course, you know, I need money at this time. So yeah, the concrete, I never drive a mixer truck again. So a buddy of mine was driving a Decker, so I just said, you know what, I'm gonna go to Decker. And you know what, it was as old school as they come at the time. It was a great place to work when I started working there. And you just keep going up and up, but eventually as a company driver you hit a wall. This is as far as you're going to go as a company driver. And what I started noticing as the old man started stepping back and the kids started stepping forward, the company was changing, and I get that. The company's changed. The problem was the kid had no working knowledge of the company, didn't care. He actually, to this day, doesn't care. He would like to, as soon as the old man dies, I'm pretty sure he's going to sell it off and keep the brokerage. That's all he really wants out of it. But so what ends up happening is
I hit the wall, and I started seeing a lot of things coming down the pike for company drivers that I didn't like. So I decided I'm going to get ahead of this curve. I'm going to buy a truck, because they started doing a lot of stupid things with the truck, started being a whole lot more restrictive, not just with e-logs and things of that nature, but just in what they were allowing drivers to do and this and that. It started getting ridiculous. So I inquired on buying a truck. Well, they were just starting their lease program. So a buddy of mine, he leased a truck, and I just went out and bought a truck. And we both got schooled. Go find my coffee. I know it's over here somewhere. It's in the truck. Flies are awful today. So the funny thing was, we both kind of had the same employment lease. He just had a few different things because he leased the truck from them, and I bought the truck from them. So they tried to run me like a lease driver, but at the same time they couldn't force dispatch me. Now, it's illegal to force dispatch a lease guy, and it's legal, you can't force dispatch contractors and things of that nature. But what they would do is they would starve you out. Well, here's what I was talking about at the beginning. Being company drivers, when we were talking about buying a truck and owning a truck, we just got all the numbers and figures and all of that. We did the math of what we had previously run and what we were told of what we'd be making, and it looked really good on paper. I'm gonna tell you what, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, one of the lies that we were told from the get-go was that there was no way we could afford a truck without their help. There's just no way. We had to have them. Well, buddy of mine, he didn't have a down payment, so he didn't know what to do. So leasing a truck, and he worked a deal through his bank. They wanted to see a year's worth of records. He bought the truck out, and then they tried to screw him on the title. They did the same thing with me and screwed me on my tags, even though that's another story for later. But so I decided to buy a truck with payments. He decides to lease a truck with payments. And then my buddy Lloyd, he was at another company hauling flatbed. He did it completely different. He got financed at a fairly high interest rate for his first truck. I mean, it was pretty high. But he's a first-time buyer. But he went out and got a signature loan through his personal bank as a down payment. Because when you're a first-time buyer, you don't have a down payment. He didn't have any money, so we went and loaned money so he could get a truck to borrow money. It was a weird deal, so he had 2 payments for a while, but the signature loan was pretty easy to pay off, and he did that. And that's a way to do it if you got a good banker. But so we're sitting there buying all this stuff that we believe is supposed to happen. $1 a mile, tags paid, tolls paid, all miles. We're getting paid $1 a mile, all miles, plus the national average of fuel surcharge. And we believed it was going to be good, and it turned out to be awful. I paid off my truck early to get out of there. My buddy of mine, when a year was up and he had all the paperwork, he went to his bank, gave him the stuff, borrowed the money. He bought that truck and he boogied. He was done. And you know what? I was done too. I had the truck paid off in 18 months. And the only reason I had that was because I had a large nest egg. But truthfully, at the time I left, when I paid the truck off, I was one breakdown from being completely out of business. And that was a hard lesson to learn. Now, we both quit. We both come over here where I'm at now. And I'm going to tell you what, when we came over here, this is where the real schooling began. We kind of had an idea at the get-go that we weren't being told truthfully. You take the truck into the shop, and if you had 3 things done, they charge you a service fee and write up 3 separate work orders so they could charge you a service fee on each work order. That's what they were doing at my last company. They were really just screwing us. They were giving us the national average for fuel surcharge, but then when I really found out what the surcharge was, I was running between 35 and 50% of the surcharge. We were getting screwed on that. We were also getting paid $1 a mile, all miles, but a dollar of nothing is nothing. We were the owner operators ended up being the last guys getting dispatched every day. They just didn't care about us. And as soon as that truck was paid off, they really didn't care about us. And so we're like, what the hell's going on? I mean, we're really trying here, you know. And it was complete forced dispatch. I had the option to turn down the load, but I was never given a second option. If I turned down the load, I literally would be the last guy. I would literally be the last guy dispatched for the day. That's not a joke. It would be 4:30, 5 o'clock, or they'd be like, well, just call us in the morning. And I'm like, dude, it's 9:30 in the morning. You want me to call you tomorrow morning? That's happened. And so we quickly started learning that we were getting screwed, but we did not understand how badly. So I come over here, and mind you, we're not hurting for cash, but we're starting to feel the pressure. We're getting the stickers, you know. And so all of a sudden I come over here and it was a world difference. And I realized soon enough that I shouldn't have stuck out at my last place as long as I did. Everything I thought I knew as an owner-operator gets thrown out the window when I came over here. I had the basics, but I had no real practical application because I'd never worked for a good company as an owner-operator. And being an owner-operator versus being a company driver is a world difference. Yes, we're hauling the same trailers and hauling the same loads, but the pay structure is different. The the speed's different. Everything's different. Everything's the same but different. So all of a sudden, I get over here, and I get there a day early, and the HR guy's like, "Hey, you're here early. It said just run up to the hospital up here in Sioux Falls, take your urine test, and then bring the truck to the shop." Okay, so they brought the truck to the shop, fitted it up, took the pictures of it, put the Qualcomm in at the time. Well, we had the PeopleNet, and so I mean by like 4:30, 5 o'clock, he's like, "All right, now head down to the main shop, about 15 miles away, and let's we'll sign all the paperwork in the morning, and then we'll get you going." Get me going? What do you mean get me going? There's no 2 or 3 days orientation. There's no this. There's no that. There's no. It's like, no, man. Just I'll go over the paperwork real quick. You'll sign it while they're stickering up your truck, and you're out of here. Okay. So I go down there that morning. I drive the truck in the shop. They're slamming the stickers on it. I'm in the office signing, meeting the staff. I'd never met most of the staff at the last job. In 9 years, I didn't know who was in that office because they wouldn't let us in. Everything was key coded. Open door policy, my butt. That right there, I didn't know anybody. In fact, I didn't even know what my dispatcher's face looked like for probably 3 years. Never met them. And here I just walk in and I meet the receptionist. I meet the dispatchers. I meet everybody. And by 10 o'clock, all they're doing is waiting for the test results from the urine sample to come back before they release me. At 11:30, I'm out the door, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. I rolled out of Fort Dodge at my last job at 8:30 yesterday morning, and by 11:30 today, I'm on my way with a new trailer, new stickers, going. And I headed to Memphis, and looking out the window, not seeing the old Decker stickers on the truck was weird. But seeing the new stickers on the truck was different, and you really got a little pressure on because you're new, but at the same time you're like, what just happened? I just showed up, and now I have a trailer. It was weird. That's how I got schooled here, but it gets better. So what ends up happening is I end up getting basically just one load on this paycheck. And the paycheck's about average size. It's small. But I'm getting paid percentage, and I'm getting paid for the fuel surcharge. And I was looking at it going, my paycheck, my first check, and I'm like, wait a minute, did I make a mistake? And then I look and realize this is one load. This was only 3 days on this. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So this check that was only 3 days was equivalent to what I was making at my last job. And the next check I got was as much as I made all month at my last job. And suddenly I realized how badly I'd gotten screwed. And it's a very sober moment of realization when you suddenly realize your worth and how badly people were taking advantage of you. I'll give you some real numbers, and I've given you numbers before. My last year at the last job, I netted $16,459. Damn flies. Last year at this job, I netted $136. Now, don't get me wrong, I had to pay taxes on all of it. But I took 90 days off last year, and I did a lot of YouTubing and a lot of, trucking videos and stuff like that. At the last job, I was lucky to get 3 days off a month. I'd get home, I'd do my laundry, I'd go see the old lady, have some time with the family. 3-4 days, the third day out, they're calling me. And this job, call us when you're ready. You mean I can just take as much time as I want? Yeah, we're not your mother. So, it just was very interesting to see how the other half lived, and I had to work for a bad job and quit and get a new job in order to get schooled on how it should have been. So I learned a lot of things that will transfer to the future. I learned my worth, and now the problem I'm having is that now that I've been an owner-operator for the last 7.5 years, one, I don't ever want to work for anybody, as a company driver again, but two, I don't know if anybody would hire me just because I know what I'm worth. And I want you guys to know what you're worth too. So here's a couple of the lessons I learned. Lesson 1, getting a truck was a whole lot easier than I thought it would be. Getting financed is a lot easier than you would think too. If there's a will, there's a way. Now the difference between leasing and owning is, one, owning is a lot cheaper. But two, there's no safety net. If you have a walkaway lease, you're already planning to fail. And truthfully, when you own the truck and you're leased as a contractor and they don't hold that truck over you, you have a whole lot more latitude to do what you need to do. I learned that. I learned, like I said, what my worth is. I learned what these loads actually pay. And shoe fly. And I learned that a lot of these guys that are getting paid a set rate are getting cheated, because a lot of these guys are hauling the same loads I'm hauling, and I see them everywhere, and they're getting a flat rate of around $1 a mile, and they're sitting and they're know your worth. That's why I tell guys, don't lease trucks, buy them, because you can't afford it. But that I've already said that till I'm blue in the face. But this is kind of where a lot of that comes from. I learned, about fuel discounts. I learned about fuel surcharge. I learned, where to get the best fuel, where to get the cleanest fuel. It's just, I had a lot of latitude and a lot of good mentorship at this company who knew where I'd come from. They're like, you've been doing it wrong all this time. Now, let me show you how to do it right. And they did. And I'm very, very grateful for these guys. I hope I can drive for these guys for many more years, just because they're that good of a people. And you know what? The old man's going to be retiring soon, and his son's going to take over. And you know what? His son started at the bottom, and he's working his way up, and you know what? He's going to do a good job too. And so that's something to think about. And you know, like I said, once I quit my last job, the schooling began, because I wasn't being schooled at my last job. I was just being babysat. I was just giving just enough to keep me going and off their backs. Here, I became much more independent. I got my freedom here. And don't get me wrong, I am leased onto somebody, but I'm treated like an adult. And that's what you ultimately want. You want a job to where they're going to pay you a fair wage, which I am getting more than a fair wage. And one of these days I'll talk about rates and fair wage, and everything you're reading on social media. The majority of it's crap. You know, especially the last 2 years. If you weren't making money then, you were doing it wrong. Or you were working for a company that wasn't allowing you to make money. It's just, you have to learn these things, and sometimes you have to learn these things the hard way. And you know, it takes a little experience, it takes a little time, and that's why I always say in my videos, you got to put your time in, because you're not going to learn these things. It doesn't matter what your uncle tells you, or your dad tells you, or anybody who was trucking tells you. Yes, they have the knowledge, but they can't give you the experience. They can give you the bare bones, and they can give you the fundamentals, you know, and they can even teach you the skill, but the nuances you have to learn yourself. And so when you get into these jobs, if it doesn't work out, like I've said, there's no shame. Come on, flies. I'll start hanging fly strips up in this truck, but knowing me, I'd end up getting tangled up in them. But you know, the experience is something only you can get, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Was you're going to get schooled, and the important thing is when you get schooled, go to school, learn the lessons, take them to heart, and then take everything everybody says with a grain of salt, weigh it, find out if it's right or true, and then go from there. Because I'll tell you what, up to this job, I had been lied to a lot, and none of it benefited me. Absolutely zero, none of it. So that's why I'm doing this video. So hopefully wherever you're at or whatever you're doing, you can find the benefit for yourself, because that's important. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.
And if I'm better off alone, breathing